And the gospel lesson points us firmly in that direction. We don't do Easter just because it's tradition. It's a spiritual event. And this morning we read of another spiritual event that is one of those that, well, we kind of skip over. From the 12th chapter of John's account, 6 days before Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, home of Lazarus, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. Lazarus and his sisters hosted a dinner for him. Martha served, and Lazarus was among those who joined him at the table. Then Mary took an extraordinary amount, almost 3/4 of a pound, of very expensive perfume made of pure nard. She anointed Jesus' feet with it and then wiped his feet dry with her hair. The house was filled with the aroma of the perfume. Judas Iscariot, one of the disciples, the one who was about to betray him, complained, "This perfume was worth a year's wages. Why wasn't it sold and the money given to the poor?" He said this not because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. He carried a money bag and would take what was in it. Then Jesus said, "Leave her alone. This perfume was to be used in preparation for my burial, and this is how she has used it. You will always have the poor among you, but you won't always have me." This is the word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
We come to a passage like this, and we're not always sure what to do with it. This is one of those bridge moments in the Scripture where the passage itself doesn't convey much spiritual meat, but it points us to something greater. We could look at it like that because it's a dinner party. We've all been out to dinner. Some of us more than once. Some of us more than we ought. But I wasn't looking at anyone. But it's dinner. And, you know, we could look at the cast of characters because they've appeared elsewhere in the Scriptures. We know about Lazarus, he who had been dead for 4 days. And when Jesus arrived, the sister said, "He stinks because he's been dead." We know about Mary and Martha because they're the ones that we always love to trot out when we're talking about working in the church. We need Marthas. We need somebody in the kitchen. That's where women belong, right? Yeah. And House in the Senate, yes. But we also need Mary, because, again, Mary is lifted up as a woman, a disciple, who sees the opportunity to worship and learn from the Lord. And we lift her up as a reminder that that's all church is about. Everything is supposed to point us in the direction that Jesus himself pointed us. And then we come to Judas, everybody's favorite whipping boy. Now, Judas gets a bad rap in John's account, and rightly so. Because as John himself says, he was the one who was going to betray Jesus. And as if that weren't bad enough, he was also a thief. The money that had been given to the ministry was being siphoned off. That's why I never touch the offering plate except in the presence of Yahweh. No, anyway. But Judas. Judas. You see, there's a little bit of Judas in each of us. There's a little bit of that larceny lurking in each of our souls. We are all capable of turning our backs on our neighbors. Now, we know from this story and other references that the household of Lazarus and Mary and Martha was a fairly affluent place. Who else had the resources to go out and either buy an extra year's worth of nard or just happen to have some in the pantry? Either way, they had wealth. Now, Jesus does not say that wealth is bad. Here in our valley, there is exceptional wealth. And there may even be some here this morning. Having money isn't a bad thing. And Jesus doesn't say to Lazarus, hey, you need to kick it up a little bit. No. Lazarus doesn't have any words. Martha doesn't have any words in this story. Mary doesn't have any words in the story. The only two characters who speak are Jesus and Judas. When Judas says, this perfume should have been sold and given to the poor, not everybody in the first century Palestine was poor. Not everybody was scraping by just to put food on the table if they had a table. There was wealth. There was power. There was exceptional generosity. But there was also grinding, abject poverty, the kind that none of us in this room have ever known. And I can say that with a fair degree of confidence. There are countries in the world where the per capita income is less than some of us will spend for supper. There are whole countries where the idea of having a storage shed for your extra stuff is unimaginable. And they look at us and wonder, how can 350 million people need that much stuff? But the Lord doesn't tell us that stuff is bad. Just that the love of stuff, those things, those attitudes, those understandings, those ways of life that get in the way of us loving God, all of our hearts, mind, soul, and strength, and our neighbors as ourselves. You see, we don't say those words just because we're holy people. There were holy people in Jesus' day. Devout, God-fearing people who played by the rules, who paid their taxes, who did all the proper things in the proper order. And then there's Judas. Judas sees the opportunity, and I want you to imagine in your mind, you're peering over Judas' shoulder. And there is Mary, having poured 3/4 of a pound of expensive perfume. The kind that was used to anoint the dead until you could get a safe distance away. You didn't have to smell the stench of death. Judas looks down and does not see the opportunity to worship at the feet of the Messiah. He doesn't see somebody who is engaged in devotion. The act of abject humility before the feet of God. And if you don't think that's your fate someday, that you will hopefully, God willing, the creek don't rise, you too will have the opportunity to come before God and kneel at the throne. And it's not going to matter what you were or what you had. You're going to be down on your knees just like everybody else. Judas sees not an opportunity to join Mary with his own hair to dry the feet of his Lord, but the opportunity to ridicule, to demean, to reject devotion of a spiritual nature. You see, in the last couple of weeks, we've had a lot of opportunities in this community to give. Some of the giving happens at the food pantry. Some happens at the clothes closet. Some happens at the schools. Some happens at Super One. Some of it happens in our parking lot. And you may have noticed two of the most god-awful, ugly vehicles this side of the demolition derby in our parking lot. Have you noticed them? Okay. I was approached a few weeks ago by James, who has worshiped with us a number of times since last fall. And James is homeless, if you hadn't figured that out. His storage shed, his worldly possessions are in those two ugly as mud fence vehicles. I guess you can call them vehicles. You'd be hard pressed to. I wouldn't want to drive them. And when he asked if he could park them there while he was moving back to where it was he had come from, I said yes. And the reason I said yes was because I thought what a witness it was for this congregation that we cared more about people than appearances. Because we could say, I'm sorry, people might see those cars and think we're trashy too. I choose to believe that people see those cars and think, here's a congregation that puts their money where their mouth is. Now, I mention this in conjunction with the story of Jesus, Mary, and Judas, because sometimes what we give is the mere recognition that there is the other person, and that other person does have value. The wealthiest among us this morning is a pauper compared to some of the people in this valley. I don't think all of us together. Warren Buffett probably paid more in taxes than all of us have in our bank accounts. But this is an opportunity As we look at this act of Mary, as she approached her Lord and with her own hair dried the feet of Jesus. And I'll bet you, I mean, I know we're not allowed to bet, but if I were a gambling man, on Monday, Thursday, if we had a foot washing, I wonder how many would actually come. Probably not many, maybe 4. Why not? If it was good enough for Jesus, is it an abstract concept? Is it this idea of giving the very best that you are in the most humble fashion? Are we above Mary? Are we looking down on Mary like Judas did? Are we condemning what somebody else is doing? When the real question should be, why aren't we doing it too? Now, we're not asking you this morning to go out and spend a years of your wages in a ministry. If you can, God bless you. But what you are doing, what you are giving, what you are serving, is it because you have to or because you want to? Is it because you believe that the Lord sent you to do this or that ministry? Judas had the opportunity. He walked with Jesus. He ate with him. He saw him day after day. The kind of thing that we're going to have to wait until we get to heaven to get. That physical laying eyes on the Messiah. Because when push came to shove, Judas blinked. And instead of saying to Mary, now it's my turn, said she's wasting her time, wasting her resources, wasting her love. Because ultimately that's what the gospel does. Jesus did not come to be served, but to serve. He did not come to show us how good he was, but to how good his Father was. Jesus came to point us into a relationship where getting on your knees and getting your hair smelling is a good thing. So what is the ministry that you are being called to this week? What are the challenges that the naysayers are going to say to you when you say, I can't do that with you because I'm doing this for somebody else? Judas said, you're wasting your time. Other people don't count. Jesus said, oh yes. Yes, the poor will be with you always. And we hear that and we think, well, I don't have to do anything then. Poor are going to be with us always, so there's no point in getting involved. That is not what he said. He said, the poor will be with you always. But I won't always be here. So, when the Lord is present, you focus your attention on him. When the Lord is not present, you focus your attention on somebody else. That's the problem that Judas missed. The opportunity was before him, and he blinked. Don't you blink this week. Look for where the Lord is present. And join the Marys already at work. Amen. I invite you to stand.